Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by Noodlers, and it's part of the V-Mail series, which, if you're familiar with, is, I think, recreations of old World War II inks that were designed to work with the V-Mail system. Yeah. Anyways, pretty sure. I was deeply impressed with North African Violet. That is one of the inks that like constantly comes to mind when somebody asks me, what's an ink you're impressed with? That one certainly was. This one is the green. It is GI green. It has some blue undertones, which I'm not sure the camera's really capturing, but yeah, here we go. I looked it up on the chart, so apparently the only fancy schmancy thing this has going for it is that it's partially waterproof. Something we're gonna get to because some weird happened. Anyways, two pens I used were these. This is a Pilot 78G with a double broad nib, but if you know what's going on here, you know that both the broad and the double broad are actually stubs. So, and then I also used this. This is an Ohto Tasché. And it has a fine nib. I'd say it's a moderate but western fine. So there's that. It's a fairly dense looking ink. Alright, so comparisons. Here is V-Mail GI Green. Now out of about 650 some odd samples, these are the four that were closest, so bear with me. Diamine Umber. This one's a little dustier, a little more gray almost. This one is Diamine's Delamere Green. Also has those blue undertones, maybe doesn't shade quite as much. Here's another Noodler's ink. This is Forest Green. Quite similar, maybe a little brighter, a little more yellow in it. And this is Diamine's 150th Anniversary Tropical Green. Again, a little darker and a little bit more yellow than the blue in here. So, there you go. There are your comparisons. Now, bear with me while I zoom in, because these chromatographies are what I'm talking about when I said something weird is going on. Okay, so, I had to test this twice, because this was weird, for lack of a better word. Now, I bet you can imagine which ones are the ones that I let dry, and which ones were not. So this was the first one that I did, and now the way I usually do this is I generally just put a line of ink and then instantly dunk one in water. That's the one without the D in the corner. And then as soon as this is dry, which is usually like 8 or 10 minutes, I dunk this one. Now, this is not how you're supposed to do it, but I feel like it's taught me some interesting things over the years. Now, going back to the one that's done the way it's supposed to. As you can tell, both of these, there's sort of a very distinct line where it starts. It is a light blue. It is sort of a sky blue with little hints of gray. And then we get this weird, like, spotty thing going on where, like, some stuff stops and then, like, leaves smoke trails or something. So lots of blue and then these dots of green that trail upwards. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but there's yellow in some spots. Less so here, but yeah. Now, this was the first test, and what I did was I dunked it in water, and the water did not move. It could not get past this bar. And I got so frustrated with it that I actually put tiny little drops of water on top of this bar of dried ink, trying to hope that it would sink in and then start pushing the ink up. It did not. As you can see, those little drops of water stayed exactly where they were and no ink moved. I then tried again and the exact same thing happened. As you might be able to tell, down here at the bottom, because I soaked this in water, the way I always do, I dunked it, and then it just sat there, and I don't know, it like reacted with the edge of it, and if anything, things started to come down rather than water going up. But yeah, that's weird, right? And since I knew there was some waterproofness to this ink, I thought I was going to get some crazy intense water resistance. I did not. Whatever makes up this green component Okay. So I wrote this August 17th, 2016, which is the day I was doing these tests. And I just washed it. In fact, this is still damp. And today is November 12th, I think. So this has had months to dry. And it's still partially waterproof. As you can see, there's this blue underneath that stays, and that yellow and green wash away. So, I don't know. Something weird was going on with the chromatography, but just wanted to point that out. Chemical tests. Now, as advertised, it is partially waterproof. So, some of it remained, and where it was laid on really heavy, more of it remained, but some of it did wash off. Now, this is interesting, the bleach test, whatever that blue component is, it just sort of intensified it and didn't remove it. It just sort of brought it out and then got rid of whatever the yellowy green bits are. Ammonia pen flush kind of got some stuff moving, but then it also, you won't be able to see it. It's a very pale yellow, like a canary yellow, came out the back. Yeah, hydrogen peroxide also reacted very oddly with the paper. You can see it started to bring out the pores in the paper. That's a more intense highlighter yellow. So yeah, that was weird. Paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Now, this piece of paper was environmentally affected. This is not an ideal representation of how most Clairefontaine will behave. However, this is an accurate representation of how Clairefontaine will behave when you've not kept it environmentally protected. I'll put it that way. But some of the things that are the same throughout most of the premium papers that I will say are accurate is we do get this sort of matte texture or finish. It's not sort of a bright shiny thing. It's more of a matte finish. Yeah, that fine, the moderate western fine from the Ohto Tasché took 12 seconds to dry. The double broad stub took 10, but here I did want to point out that this is a downstroke, which means that the flat end of that stub was dragging a very thin layer of ink with only a little to pool at the bottom, so that might be why it didn't take long to dry. We do get a bit of shading. That is something you can see throughout, both in the fine and the stub. It does have a blue undertone component. And there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no sheen. There are a few spots of show-through, but again, that's mostly, I think, environmentally affecting the paper. Now, water test, as you can see, that blue stuff is very there. It's not moving. It doesn't want to let go. The green stuff is the stuff that can be washed away, but again, not all of it really wants to let go. So it is partially waterproof. Some of it will be able to resist water. Just not all of it. Now next up is Fabriano Eco Qua. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. The more I use it, the more I love it. This stuff is great. Yeah, even here we have that matte finish. Yeah, we still get shading, which, you know, I know not everyone likes, but I like, so I tend to get excited about it because I'm self-involved. Let's see, yeah, okay. The Ohto Tasché took 13 seconds to dry. The stub took 11, but again, that's a downstroke, so, yep. Puts down a decent bit of ink, the stub does, because the ink itself is a very mild 5 out of 10 wetness. It is not wet, it is not dry, it just is. So if you have a very dry pen, this might not be ideal, but if you have a pen that's a little wet and that's how you like your pens, this could be good. Yeah, again, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen, all good in that regard. And again, the water test, that blue really remains, and mostly the yellow and the greenish bits wash away. In fact, the camera's just turning this much more green. This is a very teal colored thing. And again, the more ink you put down, the more there is to remain, so. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. I feel like we're all fairly familiar with this stuff by now. That was an errant drop of water because I'm a klutz. Yes, so dry times here were a little bit longer with the Ohto Tasché. I don't necessarily know why. That one took 17 seconds to dry. The stub took 16. That's not a huge leap, though it is a bit of one. Yeah, as I say here, longer dry times. Again, still well behaved, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. Here we still have lovely shading. I hope that comes through. We still get sort of a matte texture though. And here, most particularly, we get that blue remaining. Like here you can really notice the blue. However, not all of it remains, and again, the more you put down, the more there is to remain, so that fine would really not be the easiest thing in the world to recover. But yeah, very well behaved. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo. And yeah, kind of got all that-ish. Now this is a cream colored paper, as you might be able to tell. And I actually think this brings out the green and sort of eases the blue undertones a little bit. Yeah, we do get shading, but we get sort of more of a halo effect. We don't get any sheen, although we do get some sort of almost shiny, intensely dark, almost to the point of black areas where it's laid on really thick. We do get the longer dry times. The moderate Western fine of the Ohto Tasché took 29 seconds, and the stub took 26, but again, that's a downward stroke. Yeah, this was long dry times, and as I say here, the dots in particular, so like the dots over the eyes, those took just forever to dry, which is why I smeared this right here. Yep, just something to be aware of. I don't know if it's a surface tension thing, but whatever. Even here, we do kind of still get a bit of a matte texture, which is odd because a lot of times Tomoe River kind of cancels that out. But we do probably get a little bit of show through, especially with the stub, just because it is a broader line. So if that is something you're sensitive to, go in with that expectation. Or not expectation, but, you know, brace yourself for it, I guess. Now this paper is known for letting ink just slide away when you add more water. It kind of did here, but not as much as we usually see. As you can tell, that blue is trying to remain, and there is a little bit of something, and it is very, what's there is very clear. It's not feathering, it's not exploding. It's very well behaved in that regard. However, I do hope this shows up. See those yellow dots? Now those correspond with these. You might be able to tell. So I don't know what's happening there, but as you can also see, those stayed very green. I don't know what's going on there, but they are dots and they take forever to dry, so it's something weird's going on. Now for the next three papers, I only used the Ohto Tasché with the moderate Western fine, except to write the names. And this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. It is utter trash. I can all but guarantee you have something at least a step up from this, if not several. Now, let's look at the line width compared to Tomoe River. And you can see there's some definite spread. And we really get that woolly texture. You can see the pattern of the paper. That's unfortunate. Now, 2.5 seconds to dry. There is utterly no shading. There is feathering everywhere, which is unfortunate. There are spots of bleed and lots of show through. Now again, this is not a wet flowing ink. This is a 5 out of 10. This is a fairly moderate, albeit Western sized fine. So that's unfortunate. But again, as I said, this is the world's worst paper, so you probably can expect something a little better than this. Now, more absorbent papers do tend to draw the ink in, make it harder to wash out. And that's kind of what we get here. As you can tell, that blue, it hasn't exploded, it hasn't feathered, it's very clear, very there, fairly dark, and very readable. And as you can clearly tell, the areas where there's still some yellow and green left, those wash away fairly easily. Those do sort of spread a bit, but yeah. So water test is actually fairly decent on more absorbent papers. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper. Now, this is the stuff you find in a spiral notebook, not the kind you find in a lab notebook, and mine has always been particularly susceptible to feathering, but much less spread. So here's the copier paper. See, the line width didn't get quite as broad, but we do have the feathering. The feathering is something that is happening, but yeah, it could be worse. It is not terrible. If you've seen some of my other tests on this paper, we've seen some really horrific examples of feathering. Took 3.5 seconds to dry. We still get sort of a matte texture, but we don't have any bleed. We do have some show through, but no bleed. You can see that nothing here gets very dark. It's not a very dark color. It stays very hazy. That means it has not reached the other side of the paper. And that's pretty impressive considering this is physically thinner than 20-pound paper. And this paper tends to make inks just freak out when you add water. And here it really didn't. As you can see, the blue is fairly clear. It's very calm. The green and the yellow bits are actually washing away rather calmly. That's definitely recoverable. So yeah, it wouldn't stay green, but you could read it. Now, lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I hate because it's terrible and it's my nemesis and someday I shall defeat it. But that day is not today. Now, it took 4 seconds for even the Ohto Tasché to dry. Do I even need to bring this in? You can probably see it from here. Yeah, a horrible feathering and woolliness. No shading whatsoever. You can physically see the little blobs of pulp they mashed into what they decide to call paper. It's ugly looking. Yeah. And we get bleed. We get tons of bleed. This stuff, this cheapo Mead paper, no bleed, stays very, look, even the stub stayed very opaque. Here, not so much. We see how we have tons of these very dark little spots. That means it's coming out the back. So, that's awesome. I would totally love to pay as much as they charge for this kind of performance. Ugh. That was sarcasm, just to be clear. Now, water test, even though Mead did fairly okay, and even the world's worst copier paper did relatively alright, we get this flaming garbage pile. Ugh, I hate ending on Mead. It puts me in such a funk. Anyways, there you go. There is the strange and mysterious Noodler's V-Mail GI Green. It is, it's actually a fairly well-behaved green. It does sort of have a matte texture to it. It definitely has some water resistance. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world to clean out of a pen after it had been in there for a while because it had the water resistance. I left it in the pens after the test and used it for a bit. And yeah, I had to add a couple drops of pen flesh and that got it moving, but still, just something to be aware of. It is not super water soluble when you've given it a good deal of time in your pen. But yeah, generally fairly well behaved. So there you go, for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.